alive and say that, we've been brave and we weathered the storms which came at us. And we've taken up issues from, say, right to food at one time, working against sometimes the system which tries to keep away rations from, the poor, or midday meals from the children, or Anganwadi systems. We know the systems which are sometimes corrupt, sometimes inefficient, and things don't reach. And we've been taking up those issues quite often. We've also worked on, we work on, our team works on against domestic violence, for example. It's something which the society, there's a kind of social acceptance to it. But yet we do work with communities, and now we've got like groups in every village where we work. They stand up to domestic violence. So similarly, we worked on children's education, for example, but we work with the government because we realize it's the largest stakeholder there, and we possibly, sitting in the Northeast, can't raise enough funds for even giving education to places where there are no schools even today. There are people inside the forest, for example. So many of them, they are not accepted as forest people, but unfortunately they are there, and the children are also there, but there are no schools. So we work there. We work with like earlier when we started on health, we started with barefoot doctors till the NRHM came in, and now we work only in health. We work mainly on mental illness, but the determinants of health are elsewhere with other departments. For example, I would say that the factor which affects infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate is the most comprehensive indicator of health all over the world, we realize. But the factor which affects it the most is not the number of doctors, the density of doctors, or how close the hospital is, or how much the immunization is. The biggest factor which contributes to it is whether the mother has passed middle school or not. All over the world, that's what makes the. Wow. And so we work on girls' education. We try and work till elementary education, but also include STEM education in it. On science, because that's where we realize that science and maths is something where even teachers are scared to teach. Many of our staff also was so scared to. Science also they would manage, but maths they would be very, very scared of. So things have we've done work there, and I may not be very happy with the work, but I think I should be satisfied with the kind of things which have happened over a period of time. And I bring that experience to the government of PTR now, with the Borderland Territorial Region. I think we worked with children, a lot. I don't know whether we've heard, some of you or the audience has heard of Ultimate Frisbee. This is a game which was invented, and it's a game which teaches you self-discipline. It doesn't have any referees or umpires. Each one who's playing is an umpire, and no violence is permitted in it. So you cannot foul. It's picked up the best from basketball, and I was a basketballer till a long time, including the time I was in the army. You can't have aggression there. But here, you also have to. You get a negative score in case you don't clap at the other scoring against you. So you have to actively be a good human being to play the game. And so we use this, and it has the Indian Frisbee, Ultimate Frisbee, has an equal gender ratio. So you have to have equal number of men and women in the team. But what we have done is we've gone one step further, knowing that the gender thing is not so big a problem in the Northeast. But we have to play a tournament. We say that we insist that any team which plays in the tournament must have at least 3 religions and 3 languages in it, so that people learn to win together rather than win against each other. So these are the kinds of things that our small team, I think a very active team, who takes up challenges sometimes which come to my mind, and I think I'm very grateful that they tolerate me.
So the interesting thing is that and has been there, he's been established and has been doing good work, and that's the reason why you have also been acknowledged as somebody who, with the lifetime achievement, that it has been there doing good, impactful work for a great number of years now. Now, but the first thing that comes to the mind when you talk about Northeast is insurgency, is unrest, right? So how is it that in a situation like this, that you have managed to achieve and come so far?
One is, of course, I had taken a vow of ahimsa, when I was quite young comparatively. And so there's no option for me in one sense. And because of what happened in my previous organization where we lost my colleague, and we had to leave because he had been purported to have been kidnapped, and they had promised that they will leave him if we leave, and the team had decided to leave. I somehow felt that we had given into violence, and I needed to prove myself to come back. But luckily, my wife, I mean, who wasn't my wife at that time, a colleague, we got together and started the AND. So we very clearly knew that we wanted to challenge ourselves as well as challenge people's understanding of that. I really feel that most human beings don't like violence because that's the animal instinct in us. And when we call ourselves humans, we are constantly striving to move against that. So in that sense, we were quite hopeful inside us that people will accept us just because of the way we live, the way. And so I think one was the denying ourselves the part that we can quit, or deny ourselves that we will fight back with violence. So that's you close the boundaries. And so you have to be purer then. So as the strategy also, you will be surprised that we only cycled for the first 7 years. We didn't have even a motorcycle. And there were often that both Jenny and myself, Jenny is my wife and co-founder. So we used to be cycling at least an average of around 30 kilometers a day. And it's very sultry atmosphere. It's not very easy. But I'm saying along with us, there were many others in the team who are also. So even if militants wanted to probably make money from us or others, used to see us as too poor to really be able to give away money. So I think that one of the things that I think one of the reasons why we survived. Two was, I think we've always believed that hate the sin and not the sinner. We had established some core values in which humility was definitely one of it. So we would never try and speak against somebody. We would always focus on what is wrong rather than who is wrong. And gradually, I also realized, Suparna, that this violence that you talk about in the Northeast, there are about 238 languages, not just dialects, 238 languages in the Northeast. And I maintain that the Northeast learned violence to speak to the center. That was the last language that they learned. Till you were violent, nobody took you for, try to listen to you. That's a sad fact. And so maybe because of that, also people understood us. So even the militants, there was a time, I think, after many of these people had ceased fire and all. So on sometimes, I remember days where on 2 alternate days we have trained, say a Friday we are training the police on the Domestic Violence Act. On Sunday also we are doing a training on Domestic Violence Act with the police. And in between on the Saturday, we are going and training, ceasefire militants in a camp. So life has also been very interesting here. Both places accepted us for whatever we are doing. I think it was because of the hard work of my team, which also, lived on very small amounts of money, was humble. We were cycling most. Even now, we have probably just one car, and that also most of the time nobody uses except for transporting the mental health team here and there. So most of the time, people are working light and small, and being very humble. So I think that has worked to some extent.
And on a personal level, have you had a kind of an encounter with any one of the militants who has actually opened up to you, or insurgents who has actually opened up to you for you to come to this conclusion that, yeah, when everything else fails, then violence is what we, kind of adopt to?
Many conversations. This was when I was in the army in Kashmir as well as here. I could see that this was one of the last responses that they made. Before that, at least some of the leaders, I would say, later on, there are a lot of people who get into the movements, but a lot of the leaders, I had this great opportunity in life. I remember that one of the militant leaders from here, he took me to the camp where an SCN had trained him on guns. He used to be a teacher earlier, and he had gone to that village for Thanksgiving, after he became the deputy chief of Bodoland. And I was traveling with him, and he took me around. And I was just kind of evaluating the situation. I was saying, this guy, he hardly speaks. He's one of the most soft-spoken people. How could he have commanded people and told them to go and blast something? Or so it still amazes me. But when I sit with them and listen to their stories, the kind of humiliations which teachers have put on them, or some government officials, and so maybe I made the stupid call of going for ahimsa. But I'm not certain today that if I had grown up in such a place and I was still young, and I'm not sure whether I would have also taken the same path. And so it is with so many other militants. That it's basically a lot of the humiliation which you face on a day-to-day basis by others who think that they are superior to you, or more educated, or more in power, and just brush your complaints aside. And I must say that every few years there are times when I'm I have to contend with the bureaucracy, and sometimes I keep wondering why I chose to remain with ahimsa. Sometimes I feel I should have gone violent. Maybe I would have
No,
scored.
but going back and quoting exactly what you had said, that the important thing is to stand up for what is right, right? In
Yes,
the
I think
absoluteness of getting something right for yourself cannot mean wronging someone else, right?
absolutely, absolutely. But there are times when people are in a. I can tell you, about my experience in the army. There are times when you've lost a colleague, or you've lost a soldier to something. So at that time there is an anger, and sometimes I see even commanders tending to, just to appease, or channelize that anger, giving a wrong order. But nobody stands up at that time. And then twice it happened with me, and both times, one in one of the incidents, the person, when he was being transferred from there, and I was wondering how I'll face up to him, because I had challenged him that he should take back his order. uh, and he had, and somewhere the order was rescinded the next day morning. I wasn't sure it was because of me. But after about 2 months, when he was being transferred, and I didn't know how to face him, because I felt that he was not the right person, and he could have been a butcher. But he thanked me on that day, turned to his wife and said, this is the person who stopped me from becoming a wolf. In another case, where again I had such a thing where I had given a letter to a senior person saying that his conduct is leading to more violence against people in Kashmir. He had got hurt at that time, but I think when we talked it through, he understood me. And about 25 years later, or maybe 30, his daughter got to me, and she said that she had grown up listening to stories that her father was telling her mother, and then she had created a character like me in one of her fiction books. So it was so, in one sense, it kind of uh, I keep wondering, what I did to earn that. And it was just that whatever was written in the books, or, whatever we're supposed to do, I stood up to the right thing at the right moment. And I just hope that if more of us were doing it more often, then nobody would probably be going wrong. It's because we allow, in our daily lives, we allow our elders, our superiors to get away with it. And they could have been doing that in just a fit of anger sometimes, or, a fit of pique sometime, or just because they couldn't think of any other. But if somebody had stopped them from doing it, this world would have been a much better place. And we wouldn't have faced so much of hatred and all which we see in the media and I think every day, and which continues to shape us as worse human beings.
In your acceptance speech for the Sabera Award for Lifetime Achievement for your work, you also said that, the country should northeastize itself as opposed to the other way around. So, why do you say that? And what does that mean?
What draws me to the Northeast is that, it still has a community feeling. We all know about the Ubuntu concept, that I am because we are.
Correct.
Uh,
Yes.
and either, I tend to meet a lot of tribal people here. And unfortunately, though, the tribals, because they've been told that they are backwards, and they try to be more like the mainstream or more like us. I think if it was the reverse, if we acknowledge them as better societies, we would probably have much better things. I mean, you go to Mizoram, for example, you won't find a horn being blown, in the things. You would have such discipline. You have shops without shopkeepers, where people, you just place money and carry your goods and go away. It keeps reinforcing that human beings are good, and we can have very honest societies. I mean, it's wonderful sometimes to be with tribals. And very often the violence is also because of that, because a single person's problem is not his problem. Everybody takes up the problem. So there is a collective response. And it's not accepted in this very individualistic world. And they call it, oh, these guys are whatever. I mean, this happens in Africa also, and people call them as primitive and whatnot. I don't think it's a primitive response. I think it's the right response. Yes, I wish it was not violent, but I've been fortunate, as I said, in the Bodos. I mean, I wouldn't take the credit for it. I don't think Ant should take the credit for it, because many like us have always been propounding non-violence and whatnot. But I feel that some of the people within the Bodo society acknowledged, turned towards non-violence. Said that this is the way to go, moved into that path, and I think we are very fortunate to be there, as the right people at the right time to witness it and also be part of that journey, where a violent movement could, turn peaceful. And I'm hoping that will become even better, and we might be able to even create an ideal kind of small place where others can look up to. Yeah, so it's been nice.
What is inspiring to me listening to your story is that you've obviously had a lot of challenges, and extreme ones at that, to face, but you've managed to maintain that sense of the righteousness, if I'm allowed to call that even though challenges may be pulling you in different directions, but you would want to stand by what is right. Or dharma ke saath is
I would say, I can acknowledge that once I faltered, but during the 2012 riots, I did falter once, but I think by and large, I think we've stood up. And there have been like meetings which are trying to decide whether Ant will be thrown out, and we come to know. And so I've gone there personally to be in that meeting, right? Instead of being scared that, what will happen, because that meeting is being conducted only for this reason, that to throw us out. And when I land up there, the conversations change, because, I inherently believe that people are good and they don't want, but because because when you kind of demonize them, then people tend to become demons. But if you actually confront it and, deal with them with a smile and start understanding them, I think most of the time this violent feelings inside us, they just dissolve. So I've gone to many meetings where, because we have what other places called kangaroo courts. Very often we have vichar yahan par hota hai. So in that also, those sometimes they may falter on gender issues or, cross tribal or cross community issues. But, justice happens so fast, and so because everybody knows what is going wrong. But when, this whole justice system, which is so far away, where people can be bought, witnesses can be bought, decisions are very far. I somehow feel that, some of these kangaroo courts are far better, except, as I said, in some of the cases. So I've submitted myself to them, where my team says, Sunil ji, aap mat jaiye, ye hamare samaj ka hai, to usme aapko bada ajeeb se treat karenge. But they've always treated me with a lot of respect and kindness. So it's been a good journey, and that's why I'm sharing this, that it's not as difficult.
While it's inspirational, it's also a little saddening for me, because I would have imagined in the Northeast, and considering there are still, traces of matrilineal society, and yet we have to talk about, gender-based violence, and yet we have to still combat maybe a kind of an inequality.
Sorry,
in terms
I can't
of
hear you,
education.
but I think the line may not be.
Yeah, so I guess the internet is playing up finally now again.
Suparna, can you come again, because your voice in between was getting. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was saying was that while it
No, I
is
can't hear you.
extremely, oh, okay, still not.
Now, yes, I can hear you better.
Okay, great. So in your experience, while one would imagine the Northeast to be, much better off in terms of gender equity, in terms of also because of an influence of matrilineal society, but yet there is a lot of work to be done. I mean, that's what I'm inferring from your conversation, both in terms of gender-based violence, domestic violence, education, malnutrition. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. I think there are 3 or 4 matrilineal societies here, but they are patriarchal. So
Oh,
matrilineality is not equivalent to matriarchy. unfortunately. Right. So, and I'm saying that, I mean, you invoked the Shakti earlier, and it's a very interesting theory that, at one time when shamanism was all around the world and its high priestess stays in the Altai Mountains, and it's called Umai. And they said when it was to be transferred across the Himalayas, they realized that there's patriarchy in that part, and so Umai had to be given a consort called Shiva to propagate uh, Shaktism, or that shamanism also on this side. So there's a theory on that. So patriarchy, unfortunately, has been here for quite some time, and I'm just saying that, as you all know, that patriarchy affects men and women both. So it's not very kind to the men as well. So the idea is not only about gender violence. The idea is to move away from violence. So while we may be very hurt, I mean, it's very hurtful to see a man dominating in our family and hitting out at the woman. But the woman is doing the same thing to a child also, irrespective of whether the child or the boy or a girl, right? So, and it doesn't do too well. I mean, we all know now for a fact that the first 2,000 days of the first 1,000 days of life shape even the psychology of a child. It affects the neurons of the child. It affects the, it's not just the nutrition in the first 1,000 days of life. Even the socio-emotional responses are made there. So if we really want to have a good society, we need to start curbing violence, at least overt violence, right from, so that no child, even when it's in the mother's womb, sees that, because 1,000 days starts from the mother's womb, that a child should not hear of bullying, and that way, I think if we do that for 20, 30 years, we will have a very great society, which will probably not require so much of money wasted on army or police or whatever. I think we waste a lot of money there.
I think this has been quite an eye opener. One would imagine, a doctor in the army to be of a different perspective, or, for example, a matrilineal. So, I mean, there's a lot of preconceived notions that seem to be at least given a counter perspective than a popular narrative. So I'm glad that I've had this conversation with you, because that's what evolvement is all about. Because unless you are challenged in your way of thinking, unless you are given an alternative perspective, then the viewpoint continue to be parochial. Thank you so much. I wish we could continue this conversation, but I'd like to wrap this up on something that you may want to share with anyone who's watching now or in the near future, in terms of what is that one piece of advice that you would give, given your huge, rich history with working for non-violence, working for health, working for so many things which are so important, not just to the Northeast but to the entire world, I'd say.
I don't think, I'm not a great messiah, but I just feel that, I'm not very overtly religious, but all our religions, all our, history has taught us that, truth, non-violence, justice, humility, all these are there as part of us, but somehow we only hang them like Gandhi's photographs on the wall and don't practice them. And I think if we just do our duty of supporting the truth, supporting the justice, what we fear that something will happen to us, my experience tells you practically nothing happens to us. They have a force of their own to support you. They will come around, that Satyamev Jayate actually happens. So just follow what you have to do. And my journey, at least, whatever you have shared, and sometimes I can share bigger, has always been more positive. So I have not been subjected to violence, maybe once in a while, verbal violence, and that also not very overt. And I think many people must have fared much worse. So I'm just saying that, please, let's all do it with, even if we come to the tipping point of 20-30% people start doing it, I think this world will become a much better place, where we will save so much of time, where we'll trust each other, and then, life will just keep getting better for everyone. I think that's all I would like to say. Let's make this world a better place for our younger people by sticking to the truth and, sticking to the right path.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaul. And I guess would probably sleep better here, considering now you are the chief advisor of Bodoland, and there's going to be more development that we see there, and a better place for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Savera, and thank you, Suparna. Grateful to you.
Jai Hind.
Bye. Jai Hind. Yeah.